Pricing College with your hosts Joanna Wells
and Aidan Campbell.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about loss aversion and the role of loss aversion in pricing. Now, loss aversion is an important concept in pricing, yet strangely quite underdeveloped. So we're just going to go into theory in a bit more detail. The theory is called prospect theory, and then just provide a few examples.
There's an old saying in gambling that money lost hurts twice as much as the pleasure of money won. So when a gambler loses money on the roulette table in Vegas, that hurts them much more than the benefits they might get in winning the similar amount. And that's something that we can really factor into if you're selling a product. Think about if your product's more reliable, less likely to break down, longer lasting. That's a real value to the customer that you should make them aware of.
So in terms of the theory, so it was a guy called Kahneman developed the theory, prospect theory. And like Aidan was saying, what they discovered was that people feel the pain of loss twice as much as any gain or like the pleasure of a gain. I think that's quite interesting in terms of pricing, because often people price or develop pricing strategies based on people's I suppose feelings of reward as opposed to the feelings of protecting themselves against loss and risk. And I suppose one industry in particular that thinks about risk in a little bit more detail is insurance, and how they price their policies, the life assurance, car insurance. They always all thinking about risk in a different way that I think other industries can learn from.
What I like to think of is if you're selling a product, to a buyer, and your product is more reliable, it's a better quality product. In theory, what you're doing is you're selling built-in insurance in that product. The chance that they'll have to pay for repairs, pay for a replacement, it's much lower. So if you think about it, you should be able to charge a premium. In theory, that premium would almost be equal to a third-party insurance contract that they could take out. So if your product is more reliable, it really is your job as a sales team and a marketing department to make sure that people know that, to make sure that they factor that into their buying decision. And when you're asking them to put pen on paper and sign on the pricing sheet, you want to be asking for a little bit more cash.
An interesting point from the research is that, to what extent do people feel the pain of loss? Now, like everyone does. But the important thing to note is that everyone does feel the pain of loss, but very differently. So this is when you need to think about loss in terms of different segments, because there are going to be some people, that can almost withhold the pain of loss more. I'm thinking of gamblers. Why do people keep going back and gambling? Yes, they're almost like gambling through the risk because they think they're going to recoup their money lost, or they're hoping they're going to do it. But they've got a higher propensity for loss than, say, the gambler or the tourist that just comes in and plays one or two games and then is almost too fearful to keep carrying on, even though probability would say if they just kept on a bit more, they would have won. So there are differences, and very important differences to note within customer segments in terms of loss. And with all of this, as you can see, it's very, very customer focused. Not only are we talking about their behavior and response to prices, we're also talking about their internal feelings to price. And in pricing, that's called their reference point. And everyone's reference point to different price points is different. And as I said, shifts. So it's a very complicated thing to measure, but yet a very important one, and one that can be tracked if you do it properly.
Yeah, I think we're talking really about the psychology of the buyer's, psychological mindset when making that purchase decision. And sometimes people don't think about what can go wrong. They only think about the upside, the benefits of it. But sometimes it can really be important to have your sales team ready to, not be negative, but, make sure the customer is aware of the potential negatives. And then when they're really, as they always say, compare apples with apples, be looking at the negative sides too, not just the pluses. So it's when you're making a purchase decision, it's the pluses and the negatives, and it's the weighted average of all those things that you're looking for. And that's something a sales team needs to know about. Yeah, that's all I've got to add today.
Yeah, and as a pricing manager, I think it's important to remember that when somebody looks at a price, they can feel both mixed emotions. They can feel the pain of loss, but they also can experience the feeling of pleasure and reward from that price. So it's how you frame your prices, which is that marketing aspect. But thinking about in terms of pricing, how you set prices, like price is a summation of the value you offer. And if we think about value in terms of what, the reward, value in use, but also that risk element, then you can start almost like quantifying different elements of your service offer, not just the product, but the service offer, how you deliver it to your customers, how, by thinking about the pain points you're actually helping them avoid when they buy. And this comes down to observing, understanding your customer base, and really trying to hone in on those risk drivers as well as the value drivers. But yeah, we'll go into this a little bit more in more detail. It is an interesting, fascinating topic that does require a little bit more thought, and we'll do that in later series.
Okay, have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot.